Hi, friends. You're listening to Life Take Two, the podcast for anyone who's ever had to start over. I'm Jenny Gage, writer, grandma, mom, podcaster, survivor, atheist pastor, and your internet big sister. This show is a place for survivors, seekers, rebuilders, and anyone who's ever whispered, this wasn't the plan. Each week, we talk to someone who's lived through a major life transition. That can be divorce, loss, religious deconstruction, addiction recovery, career pivots, gender identity, retirement, spiritual awakening, you name it. There's so many transitions that we go through because life isn't a straight line. Sometimes we jump off the path on purpose, and sometimes we get knocked off course, maybe even get pushed off by someone or something. And when that happens, we get a little life take two. And I, of course, found myself in the second act of my life. And here we are.
Ready on the set? Let's try this again.
I'm Jenny Gage, and this is Life Take Two. Today, I am here with Spencer, who I don't know if you know this, Spencer, but you're actually going to be my first Life Take Two guest that drops on my channel after this major pivot that I've gone through here recently in my spaces. I've recorded a couple of others, but you're going to be the first one to post. So you're literally episode 1. It's like that first check in the checkbook when it's like 0001. That's you. And I'm really glad that it's you because you're one of my favorite people. I know Spencer from Ex Mormon TikTok, where he became a friend of mine online and a really integral part of my community, and truly one of my favorite people. Both Zach Nuttic and I have marked Spencer as a safe man for womankind. So you're one of my favorite people, and I wanted to introduce our audience to you, but I don't want them to get to know too much about you. So can you tell me a little bit about who you are and where we can find you?
Sure. First of all, thank you for having me on your program. I think this is amazing. I guess we go way back on TikTok, right? But yeah, you've done a lot for a lot of people, and I appreciate you making the time. So yeah, I'm Spencer from Jamaica. Been here in the United States for over 2 decades now, so this is home. Specifically Utah. That's where I live. And so I'm right in the middle of Mormon Mecca, so to speak. What do they call it? The Mordor, the Mormon corridor. Um, I'm a full-time single dad. Majority time it's complicated, but I do that. So
Oh, it's
raising,
complicated.
yeah. So trying to what I call it minimize harm for my children and just help them be their best selves. I am a designer, creative troublemaker, so to speak. So I'm always trying to find that unseen angle in things and just look at life in general very differently and use my skills to make the world a better place. And so I believe we talked a little bit before about just kind of what you're trying to do, like talk about these shifts that we go through in our lives, these periods of change, and I've certainly had my fair share.
You have, okay, so I love how you see this while you look at things from a different angle. Is that why every time I have a phone conversation with you, I'm always hanging out, looking at the world from a totally different perspective? Because I have to say that that's one of the things that I value about you the most. As we started to talk when we saw each other's content early on, like, 5, 6 years ago over on TikTok. And what are you currently on TikTok? What's your handle over there? I'll link everything in the description.
My handle right now, I changed from Blacksmo, that used to be my handle, to SJ. That's a personal decision related to another transformational time in my life. But it's ESJAY876. That's my username right now.
Okay, so not Black Snow anymore. Back in the day, you were Black Snow,
Yep.
and your videos hit me so hard. And of course, I reached out to you and asked if we could be real life friends. And almost any conversation that I've had with you, you have helped me to see things from a very different perspective. I don't think that you just look at the world like most people look at the world. And that could be your lived experience there. It could be your brilliant high IQ, that creative side. I know that you're also an artist and you have How many published books on art?
I have two with my publisher and another one that is self-published, and a
Or we
couple
have
other
an
ebooks.
artistic, we
Yeah.
have an artistic genius who sees the world in a really unique way. And I hope that today our audience can get just a little bit of that. I hope that anyone who listens to me look at just a couple things in that special Spencer way. So before we get into too much else of who you are today, I want to get into the transformation. And before we get into that transformation, we have to go back to the origin story. So I want to take my imaginary life, take through time machine back to the past. Where should we start? What's the era? Like, what's the decade? What's your age bracket to really get back to the roots of who you are?
I'm a millennial. I remember Y2K very well. I remember feeling like Jesus was coming back. I was terrified because I was hardcore.
Ooh.
Yeah, I grew up hardcore Mormon. So I really believe this stuff. I believe that, hey, the year 2000, he's gonna come back.
Waking up the next morning, like January 1st, right? Like the computers didn't crash and the banks were still open and my car still drove and the GPS still worked and stuff. I was like, well, damn.
And the world wasn't on fire. Yeah, yeah, it was a big thing. As I mentioned, I grew up in Jamaica. Spent most of my life there. I grew up in a small town. It's called Bogwalk, Bogwalk. If you want to look it up, a very small town. I mean, if you look up pictures, you would think, oh, you grew up in the jungle. Like it was very very small. But I grew up near a citrus orchard. My father worked at a citrus factory there, and my mother was always home. Wonderful lady. Really prioritized us as children and made us feel um, like we mattered, we were important, in her own way. I'll put it that way. And so I was raised Mormon, born, grew up in it. If people don't know what that's like, it was kind of like Neo in the movie The Matrix. I don't know if you've seen that that movie, but I love it because the way it's visually portrays this awakening and the violent, turbulent experience that is when you crash into the reality of what you're experiencing. Your whole world just shatters in such a brief moment. I just love the artistic depiction of that. And my life was carefully curated and crafted through the lens of Mormonism and by extension white supremacy. And so my life, my journey, I'm fast forwarding a little bit and then we'll go back, has been a decoupling and a negotiation with my past and trying to figure out who I am now. Every day is a new opportunity to ask why. Why do I think this way? Why do I act that way? And it does go back to my roots. Jamaica is a very conservative country. It's heavily influenced by British culture and again by extension white supremacy. So and
And the
imperialism.
colonizing aspect of white supremacy.
Mhm.
You can have a white supremacist who's indigenous to their land and has never gone anywhere. But some of these colonies, like Jamaica, it's we are better and we are taking our better ways of life, our religion, our tea, our traditions, everything to this other people, and we are conquering them and subjecting them
Yeah,
rather than
because even with Mormonism, right? It's, oh, don't dress that way, don't wear your hair that way, don't speak this way, because it's better for you to approximate the white and delightsome, pure um, Anglo-Saxon Mormon identity. But even the way you dress and go to church, that's not natural. It's not part of our culture. But it is a step removed. Still, Jamaica is a step removed from Africa. Um, there's
Spencer, will you
there's
tell me a little about white and delightsome? Because you may say that more than once today.
oh yeah,
What
yeah.
was that?
That's a phrase pulled from Mormon doctrine and teachings over hundreds of years.
From the Book
Mormonism,
of Mormon itself.
from the
It's
Book of Mormon and
right.
prophets as well. This idea that whiteness is related to holiness. You see it symbolically in the church, right? You go to the temple, you wear white clothes, the sacrament trays are either white or metal, depending, or you might have white cups, right? So there's this undertone of white is right, white is pure, white is good. It's woven into the tapestry of Mormon culture and Mormon identity and Mormon doctrine. And yeah, that's kind of where I get it from. Specifically, The scripture, 2 Nephi 5:20 through 23, speaks of how God cursed the indigenous people of the Americas, who Mormons believe were white when they came here from Jerusalem, which is complete fiction. But they believe that because they fell out of favor with God, they were cursed with a skin of blackness. So the the contrast to that is white and delightsome. So that's where that comes from. But yeah, Mormonism, as I've come to realize, is a magnifying glass for those negative aspects, I'll put it that way, of white culture. The imperialist mindset, the manifest destiny, the overtaking of your culture and identity. It's a magnifying glass for that.
And that's a really interesting thing that I've had to deconstruct. And you were so helpful in me deconstructing that. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Because I don't think that I would have looked at the racism in the church if I hadn't begun to be friends with you, because you have a way of picking things apart. And you forced me to pick apart that the imperialism and all this stuff, just very simply because I think that this is important to some of the things that we're going to talk about. As a white person in the church, I was taught that Heavenly Father had made Adam and Eve, who were pure and white. And I don't know, somehow in all of the artwork and the temple video and everything, they looked European. They looked like Northern Europeans. And they had this beautiful advanced society and culture. And then over time, that kind of became corrupted by evil. And so then we end up with, like Cain, and then people in Africa, and really anybody who isn't as advanced socially, intellectually, spiritually, if they don't have the gospel, etc. And then thank God Joseph Smith comes back and he restores all of that. So I believed that literally white skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and religion, the temples, the Mormon gospel, the scriptures that were restored, that was the origin of everything. Heavenly Father had made that. It had been corrupted by evil men, and Joseph Smith brought it all back. And that is not factual at all. That's actually not the way that the earth worked. And brown skin came first. My blonde hair and blue eyes is very, very recent in the genetic timestamp of the earth. But that's the culture that we were raised in. So when you were growing up in Jamaica, your parents were Mormon, right? So were you born into the LDS church?
Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that my parents are the first Jamaicans who joined the LDS Church,
Did they
and
join the
that
church in Jamaica? Did missionaries tracked them out? How did they join the church?
so I'll give the very brief story. My father was a raging alcoholic. One day he pulled over on the side of the road, prayed to God for help. Even though he was an atheist at the time, he grew up Jehovah's Witness and had left that faith tradition. And in his bout of despair, prayed to God. He felt inspired to read the Bible, so he would read the Bible at work. And a coworker spotted him reading the Bible. This coworker happened to be an expatriate from Seattle, part of the Schmeil family. And this is all public information, so I'm not revealing anything that you can't find. In fact, their stories in the LDS Church archives that are near where I live in the canyons here. But and his journals and all this stuff. So the coworker spots him, asks him if he's interested in God and all this stuff. They have conversations, they have a discussion. 6 months later, he and my mother were baptized. I recently spent a few weeks archiving photos of that my parents had. My father was an avid photographer and would always document things, and so I have photos of Thomas Monson in my parents' house, and Gordon B. Hinckley and Mr. Haight and all these people. Like,
Wow.
there's a lot of stuff that I archived.
Are you
So
going to publish those anywhere? Are you going to put those like on Substack and everything? Or are those just for your
probably after they pass away. I don't want to irk
Yeah.
them. In fact, you mentioned TikTok earlier. Part of that has been trying to maintain some separation there. I don't it Their story is not really mine to tell, and I know they believe this stuff with their whole heart, and I don't want to upset them beyond the fact that I've left the church. They've never asked me why, and I don't think they ever will. They're well into their 80s now and the twilight of their life. So it's unfortunate, but I try to just, leave them be in that regard. So yeah, I grew up.
Part of telling a family story that I think that a lot of us who are just constructing the religions of our families of origin grapple with. It's always this balancing act of I need to tell where I came from and the environment that formed who I am today. And how do I do that without divulging things about my family? Because it was my mom and my dad and my sisters and my grandparents who created that environment that I grew up in. So it's always that balancing act. Like, how much can you share without really like sharing their story, which is really their story to tell and not yours? But your parents being baptized was fairly significant, right? Because I would imagine that Jamaicans, especially if you were, African, if you had that one drop of the blood of king, probably not a lot of Jamaican saints at the time that your parents were
Oh,
baptized.
there were zero because that was 1974. So they weren't, the LDS Church had basically declared black people as being undesirable when it comes to leadership, specifically priesthood, not being able to go into the temple. They would come up with reasons. This was 129 years of clear, decisive history about black people. And my parents still joined, so when I was in the church, I thought, oh, this is such a faith promoting experience. Wow, despite all of that, my father still believed. And now I look at it as just kind of this very sad, tragic thing. Certainly his decision, my mother's decision, they raised us. And I can't say that it was all bad, but it was mostly not good. Right. As my siblings and I sometimes compare notes because the way my family is, we have two that are the oldest. So I'm 19 years younger than my oldest brother. Okay, and I didn't know him. I
Wow.
have a vague memory of him coming back from his mission or something along those lines. Like my oldest nephew is just what 9 10 years 9 years younger than me. It's strange, but I don't really know my oldest siblings that well. And then there's the second group of us, my brother who's a middle child and my sister who's my best friend, and then me. And so we'll compare notes and like, wow, you had a different experience than I did, and I'm sure other people in other families can relate. But as it pertains to the church, like even so, my experience was different than my other siblings. I'm the youngest, so they like to say I was spoiled and all that, which is true in some regards. Um, but even so, growing up with that, the weight of the maybe self-imposed mandate of being this like pioneer or this like first mover with the church was it's a lot
Right.
because I always had to be the good one. I'm going to try and tell this part of my story in ways that I haven't before in other podcasts because I love you. And I want to share these things because they're just other things that I haven't thought to share. So the cultural aspect, right? That's part of this first shift. Part of being Jamaican means that you go through these quintessential experiences, and Mormonism precluded my ability to do that because my parents chose to say, "Oh, don't participate in this local cultural event. Don't go to prom. Like, don't." Yeah, so we had carnival every April. I couldn't watch it and I couldn't go to it because people were too scantily clad. They weren't modest, so you
Right.
can't go. Beautiful costumes, beautiful expression, and sure, some things are sexual in nature. But as a parent who has kids now, I realize like parenting isn't for me. Parenting for me is about kind of like I mentioned at the beginning, minimizing the harm to my children. So I try to allow my children now to have the experiences they need to have within reason. I just didn't have that chance because of the church. I didn't because my parents felt in some ways they won't say this, but they relied on the church to raise us, right?
I get
And
that.
that led
Yeah.
to a lot of problems. But I think I cut you off there. What were you saying?
Mormonism is a bubble.
Yeah.
Like the way that you're talking about it, insulating you from your Jamaican culture and those things that are part of your tribal heritage. We all have this tribal heritage. My tribal heritage was Mesa, Arizona, and Portland, Oregon, so very different than Jamaica. But once your parents start to raise you within Mormonism, they put this little bubble of protection around you, and then they don't want you to watch the R-rated movies. They don't want you to listen to the music of your generation. They don't want you to run around with your friends who aren't Mormon because they're trying to protect you from any type of experience that, first of all, contradicts the Mormon doctrine and then anything that would cause you to sin. And I've heard that from so many people in the ex-Mormon community and the ex-evangelical community, ex-Jehovah's Witness, these high-demand religions that are very strict cause parents to just put you in a bubble and they don't want anyone to pop it, and they're just trying to protect you from everything. And it leads to a very insular life. And in some ways, that can be good. That can be protected. Like maybe you didn't do the drugs and stuff that some of your friends did. But in other ways, it is stripping you of cultural and developmental experiences that are so important. So here I am as an almost 51-year-old woman now going through developmental experiences and cultural experiences that I never had in childhood because I was in that bubble just alongside you. But it's so much more complicated than when Mormonism supplants and overrides your Jamaican cultural experience you otherwise wouldn't have been having.
Absolutely. And I want to go, what do people say? I want to double click on that. I want to go a step deeper. So, as I was taking notes here during our conversation, this idea of bubbles and boxes, right? So, Mormonism puts it's a bubble, but people in the church want to put you in a box. They say, oh, you're this way, you're that way. And the reason I bring this up is you probably notice right now I sound different than when you first met me.
I know. When you started to sound like a Jamaican, I was like, what is this happening?
You mean on TikTok, right?
Yeah, on TikTok.
Yeah, because part of it has been, and this is me. This is my, what you're hearing now is how I sound when I'm speaking with my parents. Okay, so there's different voices. When I'm speaking with a white person, I might sound like this. Hey guys, but I don't do that anymore as much because I don't want to have that mask. I don't want to be fake. You know, Mormonism taught me. I tell people this sometimes, it upsets them. Taught me how to lie very well because I had to lie to myself. I had to lie to other people. I had to create this perception. Again, think of it this way: the weight of having parents who are pioneers. Truly, you ask any Mormon in Jamaica. Ask any Mormon in Jamaica. Do you know the Nugent family? They'll say, yeah. I don't mind saying my last name first name on the internet because I'm all over. Okay, so I used to be. I used to have some trepidation about it because a lot of Mormons are intense when you talk about certain things, and I was like, you can find me. It's not that hard. So the Nugent family. Ask any Mormon from Jamaica. Do you know? Have you heard of the Nugents? They'll know. All right. So that's a big like responsibility. So there was that, and I had to lie to myself sometimes. But this idea of bubbles and boxes, people want to put you in a box. Oh, you're Jenny. You are this person. You are the crafty, witty, whatever mom, right? I can give you a default box in Mormonism. Oh, you're this sweet, whatever. And the minute you step outside that box, there's a problem. Hey, you'll get back in your box. And what I noticed is as soon as I started talking differently, Jenny, people were trying to put me back in my box. Hey, you're fake. You're this. You're that. Right? Mormons have a tendency to put people in boxes because it makes them feel comfortable. They have to put you in a box so that they can exist in their bubble in comfort and safety. Right? And it's not just an American thing, which is, man, there's so many things I want to talk about, but I don't think it's as simple as like, oh, Mormons are racist or white people are racist. I don't think it's that. And people like say, oh, that's all you focus on. It's that you're only aware of the things you're prepared to be aware of. I mean, Jenny, you and I have been friends for a long time. We've had conversations. We've had conversations on the phone for hours about some topics. I don't even bring them up. But what I'm saying is the willingness to learn and see things, and people have been patient with me too, as I've been deconstructing my own misogyny or my own patriarchal mindset or whatever other problematic behavior. Like it's important to have those people in your life. But where I was going with this is it's not as simple as saying someone is sexist, misogynist, so forth. It might be that they're problematic. And I think that for me gives me an opportunity to have some grace, to work through things with people, with friends, to own my stuff and say, you know what, I messed up. I'm sorry. I read you the wrong way. I put you in a box. I'm sorry. Anyhow, that's my spiel on boxes and bubbles. But you brought up an interesting thought there. So, yeah, my family, they were, in, at least as far as Mormonism in the church, they were significant figures. And as I mentioned earlier, they, from my perspective, relied on the church to raise us. That limited my ability to truly be as Jamaican as I could be. And it was easy to slip into assimilating into culture. So for me, that was the first shift. America and Mormonism, they do a very good job of marketing and exporting culture and in an ideal way. So one thing you and perhaps your viewers might not understand is from the outside looking in, right? From a Jamaican perspective or someone
Yeah.
who's outside the US. The United States, uh, they do a good job of exporting propaganda about the country, about the opportunities that are here, about how life is, how it could be. And sure, on its face, a lot of that is possible, right, in terms of advancement in society or
They're
opportunities or
selling their
resources.
potential and not necessarily their current reality.
Yeah, so
Is that what
you
you're
crash
saying?
eventually you crash into the reality. So my parents, I could talk about education, I could talk about work, all this stuff, but eventually we decided because my siblings had all immigrated here, or at least they were going to school at BYU, that kind of thing. I eventually, as I graduated high school, or yeah, I graduated high school. I was about to do what's called A levels or advanced levels, which is kind of like AP in the US, but think of it more like the first and second year of college. Like that's how intense it is.
Oh,
Just to be clear, I did all
we
the Mormon things, the callings, and I remember the church in Jamaica very fondly because it was not about the doctrine so much as it was about the love and community. So when people say, "Oh, there's so many black or brown members of the church outside of the U.S.," they don't even understand what the communities are like. Church in the US is not even close to the same because people go and they worship and then they get out.
yeah,
I mean, you tell me if I'm wrong. Like when you went to church in
yeah,
Utah, right? You used to live here. You go to
yeah.
church 3 hours, and then everybody goes home to their families. We
You're
were
like, you're like,
family. We were literally family in Jamaica. We would stay after church, cook a meal, sometimes eat it together. We had to clean and maintain the church ourselves, but on a different level than you do here. And we'd make a meal and talk, and we'd have activities, right? So a lot of these people to me are still family.
we used to spend, my ex-husband and I spent summers in Maui. We were in Lahaina. We went to a local ward. There was Hawaiians and Tongans and people from Fiji and Samoa. And it was funny, like our very first Sunday there, first of all, totally different culture. And all of the men are wearing skirts. They're all wearing like the little wrap around like your Tongan skirts and stuff. And the women are in their big moo and everybody's in flip flops. We get there like 5 minutes until church starts, like every white person probably does, because we're just there to go to church. And everything was already there. Like the whole parking lot was completely full. And people were in the cultural hall eating sandwiches. And it's like, what is this? Was there like some potluck? No, every Sunday before church, because people were coming from the other side of the island and stuff, and everybody was just there. And as people were arriving, they were bringing stuff that they were taking into the kitchen, like big casserole dishes and pots and pans. And during half of church, when they weren't even in Relief Society, they were all in the kitchen cooking spaghetti. And as soon as church was over, they're like, okay, well, like we just stay and we eat dinner and we hang out here all day. So after church, all these women had already like, look, they weren't even going to Relief Society. They were cooking a spaghetti and they already had all the tables set up in the cultural hall. And every single Sunday we just hung out. And here me being from like Arizona, I'm like, you're not actually supposed to use the kitchen because of insurance purposes. And you shouldn't be skipping gospel blotching in Relief Society to be cooking unless you should be in there like in the lesson. And it was funny just like being part of that community. It was so tight knit. People touching me all the time, like, oh, hello, Jenny, like arms around you. And people were always like touching my hair. And people would sit next to me, like total strangers that I had never met. But just because I'm their sister, because I'm in church together, they'd put their hands on my knee or just grab my baby. And for those summers that we spent in Hawaii, I saw the church as a community and as an actual family where they called me sister and they meant it. Like when a Samoan calls me sister, she's not just saying Sister Green like the white people like Sister Green on this party, Sister Green. It's like you are my spiritual sister and we are part of the same tribe just because you're in our war together. And it was next level. Where all of those of us who have been raised in the United States in these very detached systems, I don't think we can probably imagine the church culture in Jamaica.
Yeah, it's a whole other level. So it I guess the beginning of the change for me happened kind of as I was mentioning, my siblings had been going to school here. I was the only one at home with my parents. My brother had recently become a US citizen. Um, and so he applied for my parents to immigrate to the United States because they figured, okay, well, all the children are in the US, so therefore let's go there because we can be closer to the potential grandchildren and so forth. And Spencer, you can go to BYU or whatever. I wasn't able to go to BYU right away, so I had to go to UVU. In my mind, this was the best thing ever. We're moving to Utah, the best place on earth. This was where the pure in heart, the pure and delightsome in heart, were gathered, and this was supposed to be a good thing. So it wasn't something that I was really concerned about at the time, but I knew I was stepping away from friends, and that was
So
hard.
everything from would you say there was a level up in your mind, like this was an upgrade?
Yeah, and now you're pulling on another thread. But part of the export of American ideology and that aspirational outlook, we had cultural touch points that we could engage with, like having access to satellite TV. So we had an idea of American culture. My parents were, I would say, upper middle class in Jamaica. There's always a realignment, an economic, socioeconomic realignment whenever you migrate from one country to another. So
Yeah.
upper middle class, two homes, had property, land, we had a satellite dish. Like that was a big deal. So we could consume and appreciate American culture on a different level. My parents would travel and bring us stuff from the U.S. So there's that aspirational mindset. I want to be like them, or these people. I want to be with them. But the insidious part that is not oftentimes spoken about is this idea of othering. So even though I'm black and people here are black, one of the negatives is that you start to think of yourself as different, when in reality, in this cultural context, no one is looking at me and going, "Oh, well, you're a Jamaican black person, so you're different. I'm cool with you. You're not one of the bad ones." It's not really something that people would necessarily be able to determine at first meeting. So I go into this migration experience optimistic, because I'm thinking to myself, I'm not like them. I'm othering myself. At the same time, uh, people here don't know any difference. So I come to Utah. This was probably 2001. I think, yeah, 2000. No, 2000. Came here. I came before my parents. I had to help them buy their house and bought a car, and I was living here by myself for a bit. I was living with my brother. I was living with my brother for a minute. I think he had 5 children at the time. Let me see, one, two, three. No, four children at the time. But lived with him for a bit. So I was kind of handling business, and then my parents came. I went to UVU, studied mathematics because I wanted to be a math teacher at first. Um, got all the way up to calculus 2, and then had to had to go on my mission, is the way I put it. But two things happened at this point. Well, three or four, but two important things happened. One, I met my future wife, and two, I for the first time in my life realized that I was black, rather, for the first time. And I remember the exact moment. I went to a store called Ultimate Electronics. It's not in business or open anymore. And I went in there thinking, we were going to get, well, I'll tell three stories real quick. So this is the first one. I went in there thinking I was going to get some help. I wanted to get, I think it was a hard drive or something. And I was ignored. Nobody talked to me. Nobody would look at me. And I was like, this is very strange. So I actually left the store. I went back home. And I thought to myself, ooh, I am black. Like, this is different. I put on a suit, shirt, and tie, polished up my shoes, went in there, and of course was, oh, hello, sir. And at the time I didn't understand this, but effectively I put on the costume of whiteness, of white supremacy, because a suit is not an item of clothing that is universally accepted or understood as formal wear, or something that a dignitary might put on, right? That's just a product of colonialism and imperialism. Because, say, for example, in Nigeria, they have different ceremonial and clothes of distinction that you might put on. Same in Jamaica, it's just different, but that's not recognized here. And so I realized I had to literally put on this costume so that I could be seen. Didn't think too much of it, because I'm always thinking in my head, okay, maybe they didn't mean it that way. Maybe it's not so bad. That was my first experience. Then I've told this one on TikTok, but my family and I went to a store called Food for Less. My father had a habit of putting his hands in his pocket, walking around the store. And sure enough, security person at checkout was like, "Hey, we need to talk to all of you." They pull us into this back room. I remember it. I'll never forget that room. It's like a storage room, had one light. And my mom and my sister are just crying their eyes out. They're interrogating my father. It put us through a hellish experience at this grocery store. We had just been in the US for like a week at this point. And that was the second experience. And at the end of it, the store, they recognized they were wrong and they offered us ice cream as a
Ice cream.
an apology. Yeah, we didn't take it, thankfully. My parents didn't take it. We had enough respect to realize what that was. But yeah, that was unfortunate because this is supposed to be Utah, where the pure in heart, the Mormons are, where our people are, right? And we're being treated this way.
Yourselves as part of the fold. You were part
Yeah.
of the group. You would join the church,
Mhm.
but then you get to Utah and they begin to utter you because as Mormon as you are, your parents could be pioneers in Jamaica, but in Utah, you're a different color.
You're nobody, but at the same time, it's Provo, Utah, and in the early 2000s. I mean, it's probably 90% Mormon. So chances are these people who are supposed to know and be and do better are treating us like we're some, criminal invaders or something. So that was the second experience. And then the third, really, this is just a combination of, or collage rather, of experiences where I would see things like people would pull their kids in closer if they saw me, or they would. I remember I was crossing the road. I was in a pedestrian crossing, and I saw this lady in her car waiting at the light. She just locks her door, and I'm thinking, why am I really that much of a threat? Like, what did I do? I was just existing, just minding my business.
Everyone in Utah is white. Part of that is that there weren't slaves in Utah. There weren't
were,
a lot
actually.
well, not that many though. Not much.
Oh, yeah.
I lived in Arkansas, South Carolina. I've lived in the South where my kids went to a school that was 10% white and it was 90% Black, Hispanic, Asian. So Utah, my son had, I think, like 4 people in his entire high school that were not white. So you really it's one of the whitest bubbles that I've personally ever lived in is Utah. This isn't as much of an issue in Arizona, but in Utah, which is very, very white, I can't imagine being African American.
I see what you mean about the slavery thing. Like, even after the Civil War and Jim Crow and all that, like a lot of Black people have stayed in the South as opposed to migrating all over the U.S. I understand that, and it's unfortunate because Utah is a beautiful place, and people always look at me funny when I say I live in Utah. They're, wow, why would you live there? And then I show them a picture. You've been to my house. I show them a picture of outside my house, and they're like, oh, right. Those were some unfortunate experiences, but at the time I was very Mormon. So then I go on my mission. I knew it was time to go on the mission. There was no choice. There was no, should I do this? Do I? Yes, no. This was not a conversation. This was not a consideration. This was happening.
You just do that. When you're 5, you go to school. Your mommy gets you a little backpack and you get on the bus and you go to school. And then, those rites of passage in life, the mission for Mormons is a rite of passage. And it's shocking when people choose not to go.
At the same time, I'm the type of parent where I'm having a conversation with my child, and when he was very young. He says, what would you do if I decided I didn't want to go to school? And I said, I don't know. I can't force you to go. So, and other parents might go, yeah, you can force your kids. What is that going to do? It's going to make them resent it. But what I try to teach my kids is you get to own your choices, right? You get to own your choices. So if you don't want to go, that's cool. But I'm not going to be here in X number of years. So you'll have to face life without that education, without those opportunities. And
though, when you live within a culture, but your kids haven't been raised Mormon for several years.
No, they haven't.
You will, with the boxes and the bubbles, when your parents keep you in that bubble, then even when you get out on your own, you know what the box is, you know where it is, and you know exactly, like, you're going to squeeze yourself into that box because that expectation. So nobody has to force you. No, like your seminary tutors don't get up there and scream at you that you better get out on that damn mission. Nobody does that. You've been so deeply indoctrinated and marketed to that you gaslight yourself into doing it. Even authentically, you don't feel like, and maybe you did feel authentically called to go on a mission. But once you have been brainwashed your whole entire life to do whatever that thing is, the box may be way over there and you're going to walk over and jump right into it because you know, right? That's the box that I belong in. If that missionary box was calling your name, nobody had to force you.
I would say some Mormon parents are like, I've heard stories, they try to bribe their kids into it, or
That's what was on all.
threaten them if they don't go. But I don't think that's productive. So anyhow, I got my call to San Antonio, Texas, and then just an interesting side note, because of my immigration status at the time, I actually got my mission call and was on the mission within, I think, 9 days from the time I got. Yeah. So
Oh my
mission.
gosh.
So
You
I'm
spent
talking.
2 years.
So think about this. This is the temple when you had to get naked. So
Yeah.
this is mission call, temple. Well, mission call, buying the temple clothes. I didn't take temple prep. Going to the temple, being like, what the hell was that? And then going on the fast. I opened my mission call in the church office building, which was weird. They have a little fake living room for people like me who had to go through a quick immigration process. They have all sorts of attorneys that can help and stuff. So anyhow, I go because you have to change your visa. I was on a student visa. I had to switch to a missionary visa, and then if I wanted to go back to school, I'd have to switch back to a student visa. And this is important because it was on my mission that I realized something is not right with all of this. Um, right.
Right.
That's the beginning of, yeah, that was the beginning. And then I had to lie to myself because I was good at it. I lied to myself for 13 years. But that it was on the mission that I realized that prophets taught that Black people would come back to life as white people. And it, that one rocked me. I wrote about it in my journal. I don't have it here with me in this room, but I wrote about it. And you can see in real time, because I was an avid journal writer, you can see myself convincing myself that this was no big deal, that, at least Joseph Smith taught the truth and the Book of Mormon's true. And that's all I'm going to focus on. Because at that point, I realized, oh, prophets taught all of this stuff about Black people. That is crazy. But I wanted to hold on to something. And I had to, because if I didn't, they would have kicked me off the mission. And you know how Mormons are. If you fall out the line, they're very vindictive, retribution, and the church has vast resources. So I'm thinking
Yeah.
strategically. I need to finish this mission so I can go back to school because I don't want to get deported and go to Jamaica and be separated from my family.
Well, can I just ask, because I always like to know what the hook was that kept you in the church at that time. And I mean, sometimes you're not aware of it at the time, but there's always a hook that makes you then doubt your doubts. Like you're going to ignore church history, you're going to ignore polygamy, you're going to ignore the curse of king, white and blightsome, the skin of blackness curses, and all of that because there's a hook, and that's the carrot that's being dangled by the gospel, by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that keeps you moving forward.
Yeah.
For me, it was eternal family and eternal life. I loved my grandparents. I come from this huge Mormon family, primarily out of Arizona. I had 29 first cousins just on one side, so many brothers and sisters. I have this huge family, and I loved my great grandma. She died when I was 6 years old. And the thought of if I continue in the gospel and endure to the end and get married to the temple, then someday when I die, I will be with Grandma Lucy again. And then I lost my grandmother. And once I started to have babies too, just that fear of what happens to one of my kids. Well, if something happens to them, no big deal because eternal life, the temple, eternal family, that was the carrot, that was the hook. So if I ever came across anything that really caused me to doubt, I would push it aside because I needed eternal life to be real. I needed to know that I could be with my grandma again, that if something happened to one of my kids, that I would see them again in life, or else I couldn't be happy in life. If I lost that, I would be faced with an existential nihilistic crisis that I didn't think that I could survive. Some people it's community, some people it's just stability.
Utah is an interesting place because so much of your life can be, I'm going to say it that way, can be connected to the church and church activities. So your opportunities for promotion at a job, or if you have political aspirations, or anything, like it's all connected to, are
Networking.
you part of the group, right? So that's one aspect or part of it for me. That
Worldwide Mormon Country Club. It is a worldwide country club without walls. And
yeah,
you get that little golden country club ticket. And that network, it's more than a network. It's like this brotherhood. And that network's really powerful.
yeah, they have lots of money resources. I could tell you stories about work, even here in working in Utah Valley, and just some unfortunate experiences there. But I think that was part of it, like realizing the value of that connection. The other would have to be, not wanting to disappoint family, and going down that path. And like I said, my ability to stay in the United States and stay connected to my family was inextricably connected at the time to the church, because had I left, it's highly unlikely that they would have facilitated my return here and helped me change that visa back so I could stay with my family. So all of that weighing on my shoulders, I was like, nope, I have to put this away in my head, and I'm going to just move forward. So it's on the mission, and then for the next 13 years. So I was about 20, and then until I was 34 is when I finally was like, okay, wait a minute. Because on the mission, I'd read this book called The Church and the Negro, and it's a collection of teachings from prophets and leaders, and it's an attempt to explain rationally and logically where this stuff comes from. And so these collections of quotes, of course, Brigham Young talking about death on the spot if you mix seed with a black person, like really messed up stuff, or being resurrected white. That's where I learned about Jane Manning James, this early black pioneer, and Elijah Abel. Fun fact: if a Mormon is listening, go look at a photo of Elijah Abel and tell me if he looks black or if he could pass for white. But anyhow, go look at that photo sometimes. It was on the mission that I found that book, and that's when things kind of got crazy. So 13 years later, I'm married. This is the beginning of the next phase of change. I had married someone that I had met before my mission. She had, I'll tell this little preamble, and then I'll get back to the book. She had Dear John Me. You know what that is on the mission? I'm one of the rare missionaries who was Dear John twice by the same person. And how that worked is, when I was 2 weeks out, Dear John, okay, I can't do this. I'm going to go date. I'm like, all right, cool. I burned all her photos. I have photos of me burning. That's the type of person I just clean slate. We've talked about relationships since then, Jenny, and I'm just clean slate. So I did that. And then 6 months before I came home, I get this note. Oh, I'm so sorry. You were great. You're the best. I'm like, okay. And then we wrote for a little bit, and then literally like a few weeks later, I get this wedding invitation in the mail, and she sent me back some stuff. So she got married. 5 years later, 5 or 6 years after that, I get a random Facebook message. Hey, how's it going? As if I didn't learn my lesson, right? And my best friend at the time was like, don't do it, don't do it. But entertain that, talked. Anyhow, long story short, got married, and we ended up living in Highland, Utah, built this big custom home, 6,000 square foot. I did a lot of the work on it myself. And we had been listening to, of course, this is a familiar story now, Mormon Stories podcast. We've been listening to some episodes on sexuality and sexual expression in marriage. And so after listening to those episodes with, I think, Natasha Helfer Parker and Jen Finlayson Fife and a few others, this is like the early episodes. I was like, let me see what else this podcast has, because I enjoy this. And I started listening, and I'm getting into other episodes. And some of them made me very uncomfortable, to the point where I was like, this is challenging my testimony. Learned about Denver Snuffer and Rock Waterman and all these other people who maybe were taking an unconventional approach to the church. John, I think, was still LDS at the time. And that began the process of questioning, considering. But there was one episode in particular I listened to about the corporate LDS church and its structure, and things like the history of home teaching and how that was related to clandestine investigation into people's lives, whether they were living the principle, right? Polygamy. And it just didn't sit well with me. And it didn't sit well with me to the point where it was almost like it dislodged that memory that I put into a box in my brain, in the back corner of my brain. right? The warehouse of memories. And I'm like, did I read a book on my mission that talked about something weird? Like I didn't even remember fully what it was. I didn't remember the name. I just kind of remembered it was a blue book. So I start feverishly searching online because I was starting to feel crazy. Like, did I read that? Did I read that? It was 13 years later, right? Find the book and I open it. I bought it, open it. I start reading and I was so angry and disgusted. I threw it in the trash. I was so disgusted with what I was seeing and I did not want to believe it. I just threw it away because, hey, if it doesn't exist, you know how it is in Mormonism, right? Something happens in the church, they just bury it, forget about it. It's kind of like that. Let me just put this away. I'll throw this in the trash. I'm upset, but whatever. Like I said, I learned to master lying as a Mormon. I really did. Open mic Sunday, you go up there. I know the church is true or whatever it is. We're all lying to each other or ourselves and each other. I knew what I was reading was real, and then I said, you know what? I need to actually read this. So I bought 2 copies because I didn't trust myself. I said, just in case I throw away one, I will hide this other one so that, you know, if I ever need to, I can read it again. And so I read and I took notes and I started realizing, okay, this is racist. This is not okay. But the real reason I left was the business aspect of the church. I realized I was a product and or at least I was the income source for them, and the product was all their lies and stories and fairy tales, and none of it was real. And that's a hard one because 2 things are happening at the time as we have this conversation about change. Kind of this negotiation with my belief in the church and eventual departure, and then I had this experience. I've had these moments, right, where you crash into reality. The way I describe this next one is you've probably seen a movie where a couple is on a date and the camera is outside the car and you kind of see past their faces. Maybe if I rotate here, you can see. So it's like the camera is out here and you're looking at the couple talking to each other. But in the background, right, there's a semi truck approaching. You see the lights and then boom, right? And then at the impact, everything is crystal clear and in slow motion. That's what happened. I woke up one morning, my ex-wife's phone was blowing up. I was like, what is this? And I find out that there are conversations being had that are very explicit, romantic in nature. And I'm like my brain is crashing. Okay, I haven't told this story online ever, but here we are because of certain events, and I don't care anymore. Truth is truth. Time tells the truth. So negotiating with Mormonism, now having to look at my marriage a different way because I'm the type of person when I'm in something, I think you can tell this a little bit from conversations we've had. I go all in, right?
You're not a 50% person. You're not a 75% person. You are, I would say that a very good word for you would be engaged.
It was Mormonism. Like I believed in a literal sense everything. You could tell me the 10 tribes were in the ice caps and I'd be like, yes, they're in the caves. Like I used to believe that stuff. People live on the sun and the moon. I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is just, they're just translated beings and we can't see them. But like I believed all of this stuff, all of it. I remember raising my arm to the square once to rebuke something or something on my mission because that's how much I believe. But I believed it all.
I want to just get a little picture because you know who you were before this transition. But a lot of us now know you in a very different way. So before we go through everything's being hit rock bottom, and I would love to hear the marriage unraveling because I know that so many of us have gone through that moment. And this isn't about your ex-wife. This isn't about her. This isn't about your experience. And I've been through that myself. I had that moment where I was all tangled up in these sheets with Kate that night in our bed. We had had a beautiful day the day before. We had made love, all in sleep together. His beard was on my shoulder. And then his phone beeped and he was still asleep. So I got up in the middle of the night, grabbed his phone and my whole entire world. And now here I am divorced and on the other side. My marriage ended with the beep of the phone. And I had to grapple with that shock of, oh my God, the person that I was married to, this man that was tangled up in the streets next to me. One moment, who's my husband, the next day, he no longer my husband because it was over. So I've been there, and I think that so many of us have. I want to pause there for a moment. But before that, I just want a really good picture of you before your loss of faith and before the loss of love for your partner. So, did you guys have kids together? Like, can you just paint a little bit of a picture of
Oh,
Spencer leading up to this? Like, you went to church on Sunday. Did you have tattoos? Or like drinking beer behind the church? Like, how often were you? If you were to introduce us to Spencer 6 months before this happened, what would that look like? What would your family look like? Who were you with? Where you were living? What were your passions? Who were you right before this all ended? I
that's
want that clear picture.
yeah, that's a really good question. Thank you. I was very insecure, and my confidence and security was largely derived from things like rule following, because that's how I was raised. Every blessing you receive is predicated on whatever commandment you obey, right? Perfectionism, but perfectionism to the extent to which I was able to curate the image I wanted people to see. Because, like many men in the church, and full disclosure, this is a conversation I've had with my boys, so I'm not sharing anything here that, like, I won't go into like in depth on my divorce because they might listen to this, but they know the onset of that. But this next part is about maintaining that image in church. So, like many men in church, pornography, um, masturbation, things like that, like that was behind the scenes. Okay. And in the church, that's like a nuclear bomb when it comes to who you are and your personality. The minute you mention that, oh, you're this, you're that, it's like, oh, I don't want people to think that. I remember a seminary. Okay, so fun fact as well. My mom was my seminary teacher. Okay, and I remember she was teaching a lesson about pornography and masturbation, and she said, if you participate in these things, you are a deviant. And I didn't even know the meaning of the word at the time, but I remember that word just stuck with me for so long. So I had a lot of self shame with regards to my own sexuality and exploration. Like I would just lie about it.
Or me. Yeah.
I had this fear of being found out by leaders because they would tell you in the church, "Oh, discernment is a real thing." Nobody ever discerned anything about me. That's just all made up. But it was this pervasive and persistent prison that I was in. you know, I never had a real conversation about these things with people. So that's part of it. Is that when I say I would lie to myself, that's part of it, and lie to others to create this idea that I was a good person in the context of Mormonism. But no, that never was the case. Even on the mission, there were that was a quote unquote struggle. Um, but what I would find out later in life is that many, if not most men in the church have that challenge, because sex is not something that is talked about, discussed. As I tell my kids, if you make it weird, it's weird. I'm just having a conversation with you about like these matter of fact things. I'm trying to help you uh, have a safe place to discuss these things, because Jenny, I never had that. Never had the conversation even with my parents. Nobody would talk about it. So we find out things the wrong way. So I wasn't very confident. So I dealt with that shame in a very unhealthy way. I would eat and eat, and I would like buy fast food. I remember, and I would stuff the wrappers under my bed. Okay, I've never told this story online, but I'm gonna tell it here because I'm old. Whatever, I don't care. But yeah, I would just buy and stuff my face, and had on, because that made me feel good, and that was a way for me to cope and manage those negative feelings. And so compared to then, now I'm still heavier guy, whatever, but it's different. My relationship has changed with all of that because I don't need to feel shame for those things. Now it's a work of self-love and trying to stay active and healthy, going to the gym with my kids, which has been really, really fun this summer.
Anytime I text you, you're always the one. You're the gym more than anyone I know.
Yeah, I made a promise to myself years ago that I would just do 30 minutes of physical activity. It's not much, but it's something, and it's kept me going. So I was insecure. I was a liar. I had issues with managing food. Um, I I was always, I would say, curious, right? Creative, definitely uh, more book smart. That's something I always tried to do. Um, but yeah, those are a couple of things about me, I guess.
Before everything fell apart, you would get up and bear your testimony on Fast and Testimony and say, I'm so grateful for. Like, what were the good aspects? Mormon married Spencer prior to everything falling off, prior to the light teach you. What were the things that you would say were good?
So on my TikTok specifically, since that's where we met, and I think you know this, plus you've been to my house, I don't talk about my life, my achievements, the things I've done.
You're so impressive.
Oh, thank you.
Pictures of like this custom furniture with all of this like mosaic woodwork, and it's like, who the hell is this guy? You're over there. Like, you are the ultimate Renaissance man. Your home is stunning. When we came to your house that day, we were up in Midway, just like 15 minutes away from Ballerina Farm on vacation. And Kevin and I stopped by. You're in there like filleting salmon to Hansel sushi. Your house is gorgeously decorated. It's absolutely beautiful. And you have all these books that you've published and you do all this stuff. You're impressive.
It, but even all of that, Jenny, is related to this thing I talked about of being insecure. So as it pertains to marriage, my ex had a very strong personality. And I don't want to pathologize, but some of the behaviors and things were, I would say, I gotta be very careful with my words here. Let's just say, not the kindest, cruel, yeah, not the kindest or most encouraging. And so this insecurity is what allowed me to be in that situation. But to answer your first question, what were we like as a couple? She's ridiculously brilliant, like super smart, one of the smartest people I've ever met, but also, you know, has her own challenges. And I always finished top 3 in my class. In Jamaica, they actually rank the students. And so if I came home with A minuses, it was a conversation. Okay. There was going to be a conversation about my grades. So that's the standard I held myself to. So we're both like these very capable, very brilliant people. And so like even in the wards we're in, she was an executive back in the heyday of scrapbooking. I'm not going to name drop her, but the company was called My Mind's Eye. For those who are listening, if they've ever heard of it, she was like the chief creative there and did um, a bunch of their lines back in the heyday. I mean, big checks coming in for royalties. So very talented, creative. She almost broke out into the mom blogosphere because before influencers, it was mom bloggers, right? I don't know if you remember. So we had a mom blog, all that. But we were in the ward. I would say we were the popular couple, so to speak. People would always want to hang out, and I think part of that wasn't really so much my jam as it was hers. Like she was definitely more of the type of person to be like obsessed with reality TV and that kind of stuff. And you know, if you've watched The Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, like that type of person. Okay, I'll just put it that way. Which I don't know. Maybe you wouldn't think, oh, Spencer, you'd go after someone like that. But I was just so insecure. And like I said, brilliant, gorgeous, amazing person when I met her. And so we were always that couple. And interestingly enough, as I was beginning to tell this story, I'm also thinking of the end of the marriage and a conversation that we had with some people in the ward. We're in a ward in Highland, Utah at this point. And I remember just this feeling in that conversation as we were talking and telling them about our lives. I was like, oh, this something is off here about this marriage. This was before I found out what was happening. And so that was the moment where everything kind of started shifting. So again, leaving the church or questioning, right? Listening to those podcasts and reading, and then having this like, oh, what I thought, like it, divorce, infidelity, was not on the list of possibilities of what was going to happen in my life because I am all in. People, when they found out, were like, "You loved her. You would do anything, anything." They knew that was the type of person I was, and so it was extremely turbulent for me. I can't really speak to her experience so much, but I would say those two things coincided. There were there were ideas presented toward the end of the marriage that I think wouldn't have happened if we had stayed in the church. That is not to say staying in the church was the answer. She is identifies as lesbian now and is remarried, and so ideas like, "Hey, let's open up the marriage," and I remember just feeling like I was being pulled along in the marriage. I would say if I were to describe the entirety of my marriage, it was I was always pulled along. Okay, I was not walking in lockstep. So when it came time to have children, I remember you asked about that. It was, hey, we're going to have children. We are going to start. Not how do you feel about this? This was maybe 6 months after we had married. Now remember, she was married before for about 5 years. I think we tried for like 6 months and then we did IUI. Spent a lot of money, and I now have two wonderful humans.
I will say, for you to say that you were kind of pulled along in your marriage, that seems kind of like the story of your life, not because that's what you would have wanted your life to be, but you had learned to do what people around you wanted you to do. You knew
Yep.
where the box rolled. And so I feel like it was probably very natural for you to just put forth that image of performativeness. You were able to perform as the husband to this woman without having to look inside. And as somebody whose whole entire life was performative, and I know how that feels. My childhood prepared me to be just pulled along by the church, by the country club communities that I lived in with all of the Mormon mommies, by my bishop, the prophet, whatever trend was new. I I did not drive my life myself ever until it fell off the cliff and then I had to. So do you feel like just everything you told us in the beginning of your childhood and looking outward to see what you're supposed to be doing and then going on a mission because you're supposed to go on a mission. Like, and that's very easy to be very just that hot power boss bitch who tells you we're having a baby and you're like, okay.
I was smirking a little bit because now I feel like, man, it's turning into a therapy session. You see me, but yeah, you're right. I mean, as I think about my life, I didn't choose to join the church. I was born into it, and I was told that at age 8 you get baptized. I was told that you pay tithing. I was told that, oh well, this is where you become a priest or a deacon or whatever. I was told that we are moving to the US. I was told that you're going to go to BYU. I was told that I'm going on a mission. I was told what to do, except for maybe choosing my major. But even so, my insecurity led me to want to reinforce this reward system of doing the right thing, getting the validation, right?
Because people will say nobody forced Spencer to get baptized. Nobody forced Spencer to go on a mission. Nobody ever forced me because I'm one of these people who, if you sell me the vision, I'm going to jump on that vision. You don't have to hold a pew up to my head. If you just tell me that this is what we're doing, then I'm going to do it with 110% enthusiasm because I believe in my mom's dream, in my neighbor's dream, my bishop's dream, President Hinckley's dream, my husband's dream. I believe in the dream, and I'm not near as easily like manipulated by guilt and force. I'm a creative. I'm very introspective, and I will jump on an enthusiasm train. And Mormonism and the communities that I lived in, I was jumping from one train to another train all the time. None of it was the train that I wanted to get on, but I was happy to like put my energy into all of that stuff. And I feel like that's a little bit of you.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. I do want to highlight another aspect that they will, by they I mean Mormons, will deny and say isn't really a thing. But if I were to ask a child what the worst kind of hell would be, it would be the loss of their parents or the connection with their family. I was talking with my son the other day at the gym, and I was like, I'm just working out so I can stay here to be here with you as long as I can. I just want to see you grow up and do something with your life. He's like, oh, you're not going anywhere. You're going to be here forever, right? So in his mind, he's thinking, yeah, this is it. And that's just not how life works. Now, the reason I bring this up is think for yourself as a child. Did you ever have the experience? You don't have to answer this. Maybe your viewers can think to themselves. Did you ever get separated from your family in a public space? What did that feel like? Because in Mormonism, that is quite literally hell, spiritual death, separation from the family. And it's spiritual death in the sense that in their understanding of God and this plan of salvation, as they call it, that is one of the possibilities that you're separated from your family. So that's hell. But in a very real sense, with Mormonism, there is hell on earth, and that is your family ostracizing you or separating from you, or just the loss of the connection, or really realizing that you never had a connection at all. Truly, what you had was a system. In my case, where I realized this 2 days ago, my family has never had a real conversation with me. That might sound like a radical thing to say, but I told you they'd never talk to me about sex. It's always, oh, how are your grades? How is work? Like they've never asked why I left. They've never asked about political leanings or decisions. Even when I tried to connect to them about my divorce and what happened, it was, well, I told you so not to marry her. Okay, cool. I get it, bro. But really? We're going to do that right now? Like, really? It's and on top of that, going back to this idea of insecurity and self-love, my father in particular, as always, just body shamed, fat shamed, focused on these surface level things that I don't understand why are a thing. I like Jamaican culture is different. If you're fat, people will give you a nickname for it, but it's not meant to be demeaning or put you down. Okay. It's just, hey, big man, wagwan, or hey, fatty boom boom. It's like fatty boom boom when you walk. It's like boom boom. It's like, hey, fatty boom boom, big, or it's fine. It becomes a term of endearment. But my father, in particular, would make a point of it. Oh, okay, you gain some weight. You're getting fat now. I'm like, how is this okay? Like you want to have a connection with us, and you're being demeaning. Anyway, I'm getting off track here.
I would say that a lot of my life as a parent to children within the Mormon church, and there's so many other systems that are, you can interchange, put in your high demand religion or your country club neighborhood that you live in, or whatever cult you're part of, like interchange those. But for me as a parent, I was talking to my children about the ideal all the time. Here's the ideal weight. Here's the ideal skirt length. Here's the ideal boy that you should be dating. Here's the ideal thing that you should be doing to prepare yourself to go on a mission, which is the ideal activity that you should be engaged in. And I was always promoting ideals. And those were a lot of my conversation. That's all I cared about. I took very seriously the fact that I was raising my kids to be.
But a lot of that came from, probably, you can correct me if I'm wrong, the doctrinal teachings that are effectively what create the culture in that church.
Sunday, they told me you should be having family home evening and telling your kids this, and then I went home and I didn't.
Yeah, exactly. Because obedience is the first law of heaven, right?
I don't know if you know this or not, but people don't like change. As human beings, we really don't like change. You might pet your hair, you might buy a different pair of jeans, but we don't like to change the big stuff. We tend to try to stay the same forever, to keep things familiar, even if they're hard, even if we're having struggles. And they see that real transformation always starts in one of two ways. There are only two core catalysts for transformation. Now I have to listen to these and think about them for a sec. So either we hit rock bottom and we're forced to change to survive. So life goes off cliff, or we get inspired. And so we have this vision and we leave our old life behind to follow a dream. So disaster and inspiration, those are the two things that force us to change, because otherwise we would stay the same forever. Which was it for you? In this time period, you're learning things about the church. And then if you want to tell us a little bit about the end of the marriage, but would you say that old spinster ceased to exist and you began your metamorphosis more because of the disaster, you being pushed off a cliff, or more because of inspiration, or was it a little bit of both?
It was a disaster to crash into the reality of the fiction of Mormonism. Absolutely, because so much of my life at that point was based on just so much of it. I wouldn't have been in Utah if it wasn't for the church, right? I wouldn't have married the person I married if it wasn't for the church. I wouldn't have learned Spanish the way I did on my mission if it wasn't for the church. There's just so much. So, in a sense, that was rock bottom. The leaving was a big move, but part of the soft landing was having my partner at the time also exit. So I had been going through the shift for months. She took about 2 weeks and realized, okay, I'm done. Read through a blog and was just done.
So right here in this little moment, you and your partner, so now she's on the same page as you. And that page specifically is our belief system for you, your lifelong belief system. You guys are these amazing pioneers in Jamaica. The foundational truths of the Mormon gospel you no longer believe to be true. So during this little transition period, how did it feel? Would you say that it was more freedom and excitement at the time that you were going through it, or was it more fear and grief? Or was it just kind of a mixed bag of a little bit of both?
I would say it was exciting, but I was cautiously optimistic. So exciting in the sense that now in our marriage we're having real conversations. Hey, how do you feel about this? Or um I would just say Mormon culture in general, my observation, this is anecdotal, but also supported by conversations I've had with friends. We just didn't talk about a lot of things, whether it was sex or politics or other things. Like we just kind of did things, and so now we're having conversations. That was exciting. The analogy she gave me at the time was it's kind of like the building had come crashing down because the foundation was rotten, and now we get to look at the pieces and decide what we want to build. So that was exciting, but also trepidation in the sense that and fear because after discovering the misalignment, let's just say, on perspectives in marriage and infidelity, that I was invested in making the marriage work, and I would find out later she was not. And so there was a departure, a deviation, right? We were going on two different paths. I didn't realize, and so the excitement was there, but there was concern because still there were certain conversations where I'd leave thinking, I don't know how to make this work. You want to do XYZ, and I do not. And therapist, what should I do? I get some um, advice. And I did want to mention this for the first time in my life at age 33, 34. I said no. I said no to someone. And I sat with that. And that was really the end of the marriage because this person, my ex, did not like hearing no. But quite literally, no, I don't want an open marriage. I don't want to do this or that. I love you and the boys, so I'm committed to this. That was the moment that I think she was just done. But go ahead.
You were so used to autopilot and you were so used to performativeness. Was there a moment in this time period where you felt like I can be what she wants me to be so that I can stay married, keep my
Oh,
performance together? Like, did you have that tendency to almost pull back into Mormon Spencer, who's really good at putting out that front? Like, is this a new era? Is this who do I actually want to be? What box do I want to make for myself?
no, this was still me thinking about what she wanted to the point, to the extent to which understanding that she wanted an open marriage, I started getting on apps. I was like, I need to figure out what this life is like. Who do I talk to? I started meeting people and hearing their stories. I met on the app Kick when that was popular back in the day. I met this Mormon woman. She went by the name Angie, and the blog is still up, angieinutah.wordpress.com. I tell people go read it. This is a Mormon swinger. And she was like, just go to the beginning and read it. They would tell stories of going to the temple and then playing with a couple after the temple. Like crazy stuff, Jenny. You have to read this blog if you haven't read it.
I was invited to be a swinger by a couple at the park in Ogden, Utah. I'm an Arizona girl. I lived in Utah for 4 years. Twice I was invited into people's marriages. One time I was at the park with Brody and Chloe and a couple of their friends right there in Ogden, like downtown by our condo. And there was this other couple and they had some kids and, they're just kind of, oh, how old is your son? And blah, 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 blah. And our kids were running around together. And we sat there for like an hour talking to one another. And then as I was gathering up my sandwiches, they're like, hey, would you mind if we exchange numbers? And they just come right out with it. They're like, so we are part of a really incredible group of people and we just like to kind of experiment and have fun. We're all, temple holding, blah, blah, blah. But the husband is like, you're just really beautiful. Like, we would love to. So Friday night, we're going to get together, we're going to go for a hike, and then we're all going to, like, I don't know, go back to one of their houses and, like, just get naked. And I was like I'm active Mormon at the time. I'm just like, oh my God, like what is going on? Twice living in Utah, I was invited into these speaking circles. And so for all of the people who like the secret lives of Mormon wives absolutely does not represent reality. Yes, it does. And then coming back to Arizona, it was going strong down here too. And I have a couple of friends who are divorced because of their swinger relationships gone awry. So that's a big deal. I think when you get married when you're 19 and you don't sexually experiment on the front side, you're going to do that on the flip side after 20 years of marriage when things get stagnant. You want to hold on to that temple marriage and you think, well, I can repent later, but you're just dying inside. And so I think a lot of members of the church who get married so young, and that's their only person they've ever been with. I think a lot of them go to swinging. So everyone said that it doesn't happen. It does. It
Yeah,
does.
and I just want to make clear, no judgment there. If you're consenting mature adults and you want to do that, that's fine.
If you say that you belong to a church where sexual purity is like the biggest thing, like
It's odd. I'll say that.
and
It's
keep
odd.
talking. What I judge is hypocrisy. I think that open marriages can be wonderful. I have some friends who are involved in open marriages. I have family who are polygamous. I don't judge anyone's sexual expression. I think that there are very many ways that human beings can connect sexually with one another. But I absolutely judge hypocrisy. If you say that you are a church that does a certain thing, then do it.
Yeah, yeah, and I know this isn't a Mormon podcast. I do find the disconnect and the creativity when it comes to Mormons negotiating their faith in the church to be just so fascinating because if they have these conversations with leaders, you and I know exactly how this would go. I don't think they're going to, for example, excommunicate the was it Single Lives of Mormon Wives cast. I don't think they're going to do that because it would do more harm to the church to have that public of a thing happen than it would be to for them to just look the other way. And to me that tells me something about the character of the church.
When you say no, this isn't the direction that I want to take my marriage in. You become authentic, you listen to yourself, and you say no. And that's not what your partner wants to hear.
I will say I have said no to people since my marriage, and different people react differently. I think my former spouse was one of those people who has a hard time with no. And but so it was really two things, right? Me being willing to say that and stand up for what I felt needed to happen. Hey, stop chatting with random people online and doing things. I can tell you more on the back end if you want. And also, like, I want this to work. So, can we do that? And being willing to live with those consequences. I mean, it's kind of like stepping away from the church in a sense, or going through change, like you said, hitting that rock bottom, or maybe it's not rock bottom, but being invalidated and being able to be confident with your choice and say, okay, well, this is a choice for me. Even so, even so, it wasn't until much later that I really started to, I think, build some confidence in my own life. You mentioned my home and how it was decorated. Beautiful. My sense of style is something that I've had to lean into and develop over time. Not that I didn't have it before, I just wasn't allowed to have that style manifest inside my own home. I was more invested in keeping her happy than me contributing, right? So much of my contributions were, I would say, structural or perhaps functional in the home. I was, woodworker, so I would do things. If she wanted a design or something, I would do it, make it happen. But they weren't my things, and so it wasn't until I left, as I removed myself from that system. Okay, and maybe this is where we come full circle to more present times, that I was able to start making those choices. And in building confidence, you have to be willing to risk being invalidated again, but then you realize, oh, this was a good thing. I made a good choice. Learning to trust yourself after a church that doesn't really make room for you to make your own choices. They want you to think that you're making your own choices, but if those choices fall outside of what they say you should do, then there's a problem.
Choose the right, right? Do you want to
Yes.
sing it with me? Choose the right when a choice is placed before you in the right. The happy moments flow. My entire life within our religious structure, I was taught to make choices. I was raised with you have agency, you have accountability. Heavenly Father gave you your agency so you can make any choice that you want to, as long as it's the right choice. And that wasn't just things like not sinning, and that wasn't just things like getting married in the temple and going on a mission and becoming a wife and a mom and all those things, not smoking, not drinking. It was also like fashion choices. I'm not
Mhm.
going to wear something that's too tight to my body. Like I'm going to make the choice. I'm always going to choose the right thing. And again, with that box, then you know what the box is. And so you're going to put yourself in the box. Nobody has to put you in the box. In my home, I knew this is how I can decorate. These are the paint colors that the other Mormon mommies are going to think is cool if the bishop comes over. I was always thinking, what if Jesus came back today and he visited my home? So I'm going to have pictures of the temple. I'm going to have Joseph Smith. I'm going to have, President Hinckley or President Austin, whoever's the pop at the time. And we're going to make sure that we have our scriptures out. I always had my eye focused on other people. And 99.9% of everything that I did was performative. There may be a little hint of like real life Jenny in some of the decisions that I made, but even my hairdo, my voice, the vehicle that I drove, everything that was publicly facing was very much curated to prove that I was choosing the right. And if I ever did anything like wear a bikini to the public swimming pool and my other Mormon mommy friend, if I ever made that choice, then I was actively being rebellious. Like I know that I'm choosing the wrong.
I've since tweaked the phrase to be choose the white because that's the real thing of the church itself. But we could have a different conversation about the church for sure. But yeah, this
No, even your interior design, you knew what your wife liked, you knew what made you look cool for the other Mormons in the neighborhood. You knew the assignment.
yeah, yeah, I did, and it took me a long time to really learn to even begin to learn to trust myself. So I think this phase of my life now, moving past that, so that was maybe 10 years ago at this point.
Can I ask you, before you past it, were you heartbroken? Your marriage just ending, you've lost your faith.
Oh, I was a mess.
I'd like you to share with people who've gone through transition because sometimes it looks so easy on the outside. Maybe on the outside it did look easy
Oh,
for other people. But did you go through a period where you were laying in bed, crying yourself to sleep at night and feeling like what did that look like? When everything you wrote about on marriage ends and now you find yourself a single dad without the church.
I think it took some time to obviously decouple myself from the programming of Mormonism. So having gone through this traumatic experience, my first thought was, "Oh, I need somebody. I need somebody. All right, I can't do this alone." And so, yeah, I took maybe 6 weeks to myself, and then I tried dating again. I tried dating an LDS woman, um, and that was a mistake. Uh, didn't go well. I even went to because I wasn't it wasn't like a clean break from the church per se. I tried to go to a mid singles ward, and I realized everybody here is depressed and fixated on marriage. So I'm not going to do this anymore, and I stopped. I I was a mess because I still had to mask. I was in Highland, Utah, still going to the same ward. I went because I did not want to give those people the satisfaction of seeing a black man stop going to the Mormon church with his children. I wanted to be strong, again, maintaining the image I wanted to project to other people. But it took some time. It was turbulent. I would, yes, cry a lot. I remember there were days I would just not eat because I couldn't eat. I lost 8 pounds in a week once. I would just eat an apple and have a swig of rum and just bawl my eyes out because
For me, it's a pivot that I never alcohol until I left the church. Yeah, I never did before, ever, never had a sip of alcohol. And the only thing I drank was apple whiskey.
I think for some people, and every change, every pivot in life is different. This one in particular, I think, is common, and I'm not saying my experience is emblematic of how it is for every ex-Mormon, but because we haven't truly lived life I wanted to live life, so I went crazy for a bit. I went through a yes phase, yes to everything. Use your imagination.
You have to. I think you
Yes to
have
everything.
to.
Because I didn't know for myself. I wanted to know.
Because I hadn't been allowed to go through any of that developmentally as a teenager, as a
Boy.
college student. I was walking the Mormon line my whole entire life and being as righteous as I could. And then when you transition out of that faith system, I think you have to try that other side of the pendulum and embrace the chaos. And not embracing the chaos, though for me, I was somewhat irresponsible in the ways that I did that as a 44-year-old woman that like what happened that's never gonna be divulged. But I was a little bit irresponsible. I wish that I had been not quite as irresponsible. But I think that those lessons helped me reset to my authentic self. I don't think that I could have become who I am today had I not just gone wild as I left the church and left my marriage in so many ways.
Yeah, and I would say it's scary because you are quite literally going against everything you were taught. Right. So even the idea that, well, leaving the church means that I'm going to be in financial ruin, right? I'm not going to receive those blessings. And I had to, well, that's what I mean by trying things and then getting the validation to say, okay, I made a choice and I realized that this thing that's been hanging over my head, this thinking about like pervasive negative energy from the church isn't real, right? That's not how the real world works. So those little experiments, or in your case, as you say, whole phase, I went through a whole phase too. Put up the numbers, so to speak, and learned a lot about myself and others. And it's important for us to, I think, as humans, have human experiences, and the LDS Church doesn't really allow that. So was it easy? No. There were many nights, many days of doubt, stress, anguish. I had a therapist, which had spent a lot of money on, but it was money well spent. Read a lot of books. I decided to travel and just get out as much as I could. I needed to burst that bubble, as you put it. And it's important. I still travel a lot whenever I can because it's a reminder that the world is big and expansive, and a church is not the world, and a relationship is not the world, and even our kids are not the world. Okay, some people might not like that, but it's true. Like there's so much out there. So it was kind of just stepping into the dark. I remember distinctly having a thought when I was going through all of this that I had to make a choice. Either I was going to be dragged along by life again, because I realized, okay, I was like, it's kind of like being behind a pickup truck. I can either, maybe this is a gruesome image, but this is what I thought in my head. I can either be dragged along here, or I can get up and try and walk and then run and find my footing, so to speak. I even got a tattoo that was a phrase that kept me alive, frankly. Onward and upward, right? Because I knew I needed to move forward and I wanted to move up. I wanted to keep improving myself, improving my life. I wanted to change my perceptions of things. Um, Deconstruction is the word that I think I would say probably came into vogue in the last 4 or 5 years. But the process to me really is just asking yourself the questions that need to be asked and being willing to follow those questions to whatever answers they may surface, and then deal with that. That's it. Oh, what do I like about sex? How do you know? How do I feel about money? What does money even mean to me? How am I going to, what kind of parent do I want to be? Because Mormonism will tell you the answers for all of those things, but what do you want? And so my shift, as it were, has led me to several phrases that are guiding principles for me now, like don't should on yourself. SHOULD.
Oh my God.
Yeah, stop
Wow.
shoulding on yourself. Right. I should do this. Stop saying sorry. I used to say sorry all the time. Sometimes I slip up. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Like, are you sorry? Are you sorry? Why are you sorry? Or is your heart with the person? Hey, I feel for you right now. I can't imagine how difficult that is. Because sometimes words, in a way, I'm not super woo-woo, but words can set the stage for how our thoughts manifest themselves when you say something. And I had to say some things out loud. There were days I would scream, I would cry, I would yell. I remember one time I was with my kids and I had to pull over on the road, and I slumped down on the side of the car and started bawling. I had to let it out, right? And my ex would make fun of me for crying and tell my boys, "Oh, he cries all the time." And you know what? I realized, I told my sister this the other day, I've never saw my father cry. Sorry. I don't know why.
My fathers weren't allowed to cry.
I've never seen him cry, and I'm a crier ever since I turned 40. And my boys will have their emotions, and I'm like, it's okay. If you need a minute, that's fine. We can talk later, but feel your feelings. That was another thing I had to learn as you go through these changes. Like, don't fight the feelings you're feeling. Emotions are just communication. It's telling you something. Maybe you have an unmet need, or maybe the reason you're excited about something or someone is what? You fill in the blank. That's for you to fill it, right? Emotions are just communication. And I had to accept these things as I started moving through life and experimenting and going through this change. So yes, as a newly single father, freaked out, okay, having to figure everything out. At the time, divorce and custody was 50-50. My ex hasn't been super present in their lives, kind of on and off. She's back now, kind of. And took on full-time single parenting for the last almost 6 years now. And that taught me a lot because, I was terrified, but I knew what I had to do. And I suppose Mormonism did a good job of helping me be duty bound and fulfill obligations and commitments. That's something I still value. I don't think, like I said in the beginning, I don't think it was all bad, but it was mostly bad. There are good things, good ideas that I think are worth consideration, and that's one of them. But even my deconstruction and my change in perception goes as far as even how I define what a good parent is. Being a good parent isn't what the world says or someone else says. It's what I decide. And recognizing that as a full-time single dad, I have the capacity for certain things, and I have these conversations with my kids. Hey, sorry, we're not the family who is going to go tour Europe this year by ourselves. Like, it's just not going to happen. I'm sorry. Well, I'm not sorry, but this is how it is. Okay. If there's something you want to work towards, let's have a conversation about it. If you have a problem with me, let's have a conversation. If my son and I, my oldest, he's like my little bestie. We get into fights, right? He's feeling some type of way. I'm feeling some type of way. Clash. Afterwards, if I'm having a moment, go talk to him. Hey, here's where I messed up. I let my emotions get to this place where I did this thing. I'm sorry. And he'll be like, you know what, you're right. I appreciate that. I'm like, thank you. And then that's it. My parents never apologized to me either. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human. And I want to be the parent that I never had. I want to be the friends I never had. I'm still working through some of that to try to figure out how to show up for people, but also maintain my own boundaries and standards for friendship. And Jenny, you're one of those people. I've, again, had many conversations with you, and I think you're a very discerning person, very loyal, very clear in, I think, your intentions and where you stand. And I was smiling at the introduction because I was terrified of you on TikTok at first.
Well,
Like a few others. Well, because I was timid. I didn't really know what was going on and all of that. But you've shown yourself to just be this consistently consistent human. I don't have a better way of saying that. Like, you are you. And the other thing is, in all of this journey, is just realizing I don't have to be for everyone. That's part of the unpacking of this. Like,
that's a really hard lesson to learn because within our culture, I was trying to be for everyone all the time. And I can have that image, I can have that interaction that makes anybody love me. And what I'm doing is self-abandoning in some way big, some ways small, a million times a day. And to see the self-abandonment and stands in who I am has meant losing a lot of people. And it's really hard. But the beauty of that is there's people that are still standing in the circle with me. are the people that I can just be myself with. They get me, they see me. I don't have to be fake. I don't need the church girl voice or the certain way of being. I can just be me. But that's a really hard thing when you live in a community where you're always people pleasing with everybody, to just act like yourself. And sometimes people that you love aren't going to love you back anymore. And it's heartbreaking. That's hard. You know, it's a beautiful lesson. What is Brene Brown says that we need like 5 ride or dies. And she's like, everybody else, they're going to be varying levels on the spectrum of hating you, fearing you, just not wanting anything to do with you. And some of them are going to like you. But really, if we have 5 ride or dies in life, then we're blessed.
Yeah, I think I've got 4 of those 5 slots filled. Don't worry, you're in there, but still working on it. And yeah, it's just those lessons, you know, not to bring everything back to Mormonism, but I mean, I spent 34 years of my life in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
The friendships you develop in Mormonism will be vast, but they're very shallow. They're very conditional, very contingent on your connection through the church. The minute you show up different, you step outside of the box they've already put you in, you're a problem. It's a problem, right? Because it makes them uncomfortable. And it makes them uncomfortable, frankly, to see you thrive. It makes them uncomfortable.
Because that breaks all of their imaginary rules. I thought that apostates were supposed to have these miserable lives. And now that I'm an apostate, my life is bad as ever. And we'll get to that with you in just a second. It's like, oh, shit. The apostates are actually happy. That's not been. I will see, though, in whether you're going through a transition with your job or, you know, gender, whatever that transition is, immigrating to another country, because people who listen to my podcast come from all over the world, and not everyone left the Mormon church or left a marriage. We all go through these life transitions where we've lost the old life and we have our life take 2 moments. I feel like those people that are back there still in Act 1, some of them may not be comfortable with you right now. But for me, with Mormonism and divorce, as my friends have then gone through their own rocky divorces, and then they come over there and they're like, oh, Jenny, now we can be friends again, because now I understand what it's like to lose everything. Now I understand that no matter how hard you work to make that marriage together, sometimes it fails. When people go through their own little life take 2 moments, and especially in Mormonism, especially with the religion, my Mormon friends and family who have left the church, once that little light bulb turns on and they see, oh, Jenny wasn't just trying to smoke, drink, have sex with people. She wasn't just trying to be evil. She truly had a desire to be more authentic and live with integrity, and staying within Church of Jesus Christ Blood didn't allow her to do that. Once that light bulb goes on for them and they come over to the other side, then you get them back again. And, you know, some of my Mormon friends and family, I will never have that relationship as long as the gospel alienates us. But yeah, when people come over to the other side, sometimes they're back. So
yeah, you make really good points there. It's very familiar. I think people who have left can relate to this conversation. I imagine people who've been through divorce as well. But sometimes I look back and yeah, I mourn certain things. You know, mourn the even if it's the dream or illusion of what could have been. But at the same time, I'm happy for who I am now. And I wouldn't be who I am without those negative experiences. I would say just the things would be perhaps the maybe predictability, comfort, stability of life with a partner and all that. That's one of the things. Or I think being a part, even if it was shallow, being a part of a community of individuals who were very like-minded, rebuilding community after that time can be a monumental task. Finding the right people and not being prone to assuming by way of association that people are just inherently good. One of the things we take from Mormonism, I think, when we leave the church is that we assume that, oh, ex-Mormons, you're ex-Mormon, I'm ex-Mormon, you're cool, I'm cool. But that's not always the case, right? So it sometimes you just learn the hard way, like, well, at least I do. I have to be a bit more careful, a bit more discerning, a bit more scrutinizing, perhaps, and not so quick to trust, quick to make assumptions like we did in the church. Oh, you went on a mission? You must be a good person. Let's get married. Or, oh, you did the XYZ. Like, that's what I did. I don't know if you did that. A lot of people I know do that or have done that as Mormons. But
you're ex-Mormon? We're all friends. Somebody told me a while ago the allegory of leaving something like Mormonism, evangelicism is very much moving to a foreign country. And you've done both of those. I have friends who the mom and dad moved from Mexico just like 8 years ago. And they have struggled to build that new community and learn the language and learn all of the American ways. And so it's hard for the first generation, but then their kids are totally assimilated. And that second generation does better, just like migrating to a foreign country. So I think that for those of us who've left high demand religions like we have, I think that we will struggle a little bit, really, the rest of our lives with that community, with finding those friends and finding our place. I think as German gets better all the time, but I'm never going to have a ward and a stake and all of those people that are part of my life, like I had in the Mormon church. But my kids, they're second generation immigrants out of Mormonism. It's so much better for them. They're happy. They're rooted and they're making the friends because it's just who they are.
You have to work to build the relationships you have after leaving Mormonism. One of my things lately is be aware of people who collect you instead of connect with you, because it's almost like, buying a bunch of books, never reading them, but you have them on the shelf so you can say, oh yeah, I have them. But are you making the time to turn the first page or turn the pages in your friends' lives, checking in, asking questions? Hey, are you okay? I know we don't talk all the time, but you'll text me, I text you, hey, how are you doing? I was thinking about, things like that, right?
If it was in Arizona, I'd be like knocking on your door all the time. Wow, I have a couple questions for you.
Right.
So I would love for you, now that we've taken us through your transition out of Jamaica, your transition out of the Mormon church, your transition out of your marriage, I would like you to introduce us to Spencer 2025. Yeah, my audience doesn't know who you are, and you're telling us a little bio about yourself. Who would you say you are? Who are you?
Oh, who is Spencer 2025? That's a fantastic question. I think I'm still figuring that out, but as I kind of mentioned earlier, finding my voice is one of those things, and it may change. I may slip back into old patterns here and there, but I don't want to go back. Part of the reason for that is related to this whole conversation, really, that I grew up Mormon first, and then Jamaican, and then Black. So as I've removed the Mormonism from my life, it's trying to reconnect with those Jamaican roots and then decide for myself what it means to be Black, where I am. I'm not planning on retreating, removing myself from the state of Utah, as many people are surprised by that, but I have my reasons. And who I am today is, I think, a product of that decoupling and removal of Mormonism from my life. I don't follow ex-Mormon creators anymore. You're an exception, but you're not doing that anymore, right? I think that was a necessary part of my process to just get it out, because it's in those conversations and sharing our stories that we gain some clarity, and clarity is never a bad thing. So once that was gained, it was okay, on to the next thing. Who am I? Well, I was born in Jamaica. What does that mean? I was sitting on my front porch the other night and I thought to myself, wow, you are one of a few million people in the world who have this shared experience. That's crazy, being from Jamaica, right? So I don't know what the population is now, but when I was growing up, it was like 1.5 million people. That's it. And if you count, maybe there's millions others in the world. That's nothing. I'm unique. I am me, right? That's been part of the realization. One thing I like to ask, I have this class that I teach online. It's a mix of personal development, critical thinking, and philosophy. And I ask the students or participants, who are you? Take away everything. Take away the job, take away family, whatever. Who are you at your core? How would you answer that question? And I don't expect your listeners or you to even answer that question, but it's a fun thought experiment. Take it all away. Take away your partner, take away your kids, take away where you are. Who is Jenny? Who is Spencer? That's the type of thing and mind space I'm in. Who am I? I am, and and my personal answer is I am who I am. Meaning the things I do with intention. I do as a reflection of who I am on the inside. And if I do something ugly, that means I got something ugly on the inside I have to address. But I'm not afraid of tough conversations anymore. Criticism, happy to have those. I love the truth. I learned my lesson through hard experience. Don't lie. Don't lie about things you do, your intentions, other people. I love the truth. I don't have to go through the mental labor of having to manage impressions and perceptions of other people and all of that stuff, right? Because that's the truth. It just is how it is. I don't care if someone disagrees with me about Mormonism anymore. I don't need to justify why I left. I don't need to prove to them that it's wrong, because it just is what it is. I am trying to be a good father, and to that, I mean present, a participant in their lives, and recognizing the privilege that it is to participate in that process. I'm not trying to create mini versions of myself. I want to magnify the good things in them, give them the opportunities to mess up if it means messing up. It could be as simple as my oldest, he just broke his phone. Like, okay, you did that. Now you have to live without a phone for a bit. All right. Learn your lesson, you're going to do some extra chores, whatever. But I'm not going to go above and beyond that, because there's no benefit from my perspective to punishing children in certain ways. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But that's a separate conversation. I just want to be a good person. I want to contribute to the world in a way that I'm able to just leave something behind. That's one of the motivations for writing books. I want to be kind. I want to share my talents and experience with others as much as I can. That's who I am. I am confidently me. Maybe not consistently so, but I can say no. I can keep a boundary, even if someone feels that it's unfair. I get a choice. I get to decide what I put up with. I don't have to be dragged along into something with someone or a group of people. I can opt out.
My next question is, have you heard the phrase, I'm totally different now than I was before, and I'm more myself than I've ever been before? And you literally just answered that.
Yeah, one of the interesting conversations I had, and I suspect it would be even more so, but right after my divorce, there are people here in the state of Utah who knew me growing up, Jamaicans who immigrated. And one of them said to me, "You seem so much more yourself now," because I was outside of the parameters of marriage, a marriage where I was so invested in being this person that my partner needed me to be. One small aside I forgot to mention is that when I got married, she even made me throw away clothes that to me were an expression of who I was. Nowadays, I wear mostly black, but every now and then I like funky colors, or I like a funky thing. These glasses, people know I love these round glasses, right?
I love your glasses so much.
Thank you. It was akin to that. Inviting someone into my life and having them say, "You need to get rid of all your glasses," and me making the decision, okay, I'll just do that. I'll remove this part of myself. My most recent relationship, at the end, I was told, "Oh, I hate your beard. I hate the way you dress." And I'm thinking, okay, that's weird to say. I'm not changing anything, right? So that's who I am today. I am me. It is what it is.
If the year of today could go back and sit with that old version of yourself, what would this man, the man who keeps the glasses, keeps the beard, doesn't throw away the clothes, who you are, you are leaning into authenticity and instinct and integrity and rooting into your Jamaican past. If this beautiful version of Spencer that I know, the only version of Spencer that I've ever known, if this man here could go back to, I don't know, the young kid getting ready to go on that mission, or the newlywed you, or just in general, the Spencer who knew how to be inside that box and make the box look amazing. If you could go back to old Mormon Spencer, wherever you want to land in that timeline, what would your state of that? What would that Spencer need to hear?
I would say, well, that's a fantastic question, but I would say, remember your name And that is meant to remind myself who I am, or don't forget who you are. You're a Jamaican. You're a Nugent. Remember where you grew up. Remember where you came from. Remember your roots. I actually tell that to my boys. Remember your name. It's a thing that we do. Respect yourself. And the other thing would be to ask myself questions from the perspective of the outsider. How do you really feel about having children? See, do you really want to do that right now? How do you feel about moving? How do you feel about building a 6,000 square foot house? Is that really what you want to do? Why don't you say no? No one ever asked me that question my whole life, right? Until my therapist encouraged me to do it. Shout out to Jen for the yeah, it's asking. It would be asking myself those questions and just reminding myself who I am.
That's absolutely beautiful. Okay, my last question for you is, are you happy now? You've been through, we talked about the major transitions here from Jamaica to Utah to leaving the church to leaving a marriage, finding yourself where you are here today. Are you happy now? And was that journey and all the things that you've gone through? Was your life take two worth it?
Absolutely no hesitation. I'm happy now, and I say that in light of a change in what happiness means. For example, when I was younger, I used to think I had to have the money and the image of something to be happy and also to project happiness. And that is not the case for me now. I am happy, I'm content, I'm peaceful. And it is rare right now, the way things are, that I am not happy.
Is there anything else you want to share? Any final thoughts?
The follow up to that is the reason for that happiness is I'm living the life that I want to live. To the extent to which I'm able right now, that's in alignment, and that makes me happy. I would say to everyone, if you're listening to this, if you're at the point where you're about to jump into that void, to take a step into the unknown, just do it. I think our souls, our being, our core communicates with us, and we oftentimes know what is for us. It's just fear that sometimes keeps us. And in a pragmatic sense, like, that's just a human response. We don't know what tomorrow brings. Each of us doesn't know. We have no idea, but we still move forward, onward and upward, right? So take a step, even if it's a baby step. You have a dream, you have a goal, you have something you want to do, the life you want to create, take a step. If you are in a situation as well where you're uncertain about a friendship, a relationship, a situation at work, say no and watch what happens, and believe how those people will show up in your life, or believe what they show themselves to be. Say no, because if they don't respect that, they don't respect you.
That is terrifying. And I think some of the soundest advice that I've ever heard. And I have to say, just from like a selfish standpoint, I get advice like this all the time. And Spencer, I truly would not be where I am today and who I am today without some of this wisdom that you've shared with me along the way. There were times when I was surrounded by all of these voices and all of these people as I was deconstructing and starting out on TikTok and engaging in the whole Ex Mormon community, and everyone else was in chaos. And you have been the steady voice of wisdom and leading for me for so long. And just kind of selfishly, I'm really excited to share wisdom like this with my audience, because I know that there are so many people who need to hear stuff like that. So thank you for everything you shared with me. Thank you for sharing today. Thank you for being so vulnerable and so sincere in the things that you've shared. I know that there are people who this is really going to hit home with. And just thank you for opening up and reminding us that it is possible to be happy in our life take choose. Did you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Oh, just the final thing, I guess, would be, if you're leaving a system like Mormonism or any other faith, that the world is invested in your downfall, truly. and your insecurities. Even from a marketing perspective, the things you are sold to you on the premise that they will complete you. They will give you that happiness. If you live your life in a way that you're happy and content, that is like the best revenge, so to speak, or the best way to just move forward. And it'll make them mad, those people who hate you, because it tells them, oh, you didn't need this thing I was offering you.
And if you don't need that thing that they're offering, then you're not willing to work to get that thing. And then they lose your labor, they lose your money, they lose your time and energy investment. And really, they're the ones who are losing. And I'm really glad that you said that. And it is beautiful to be on the other side of a high demand religion and be investing all of my time, resources, labor, everything that I have been given, everything that I will be given, not to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but to myself.
And I appreciate you sharing that, because I desire all to receive it, all the rest.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. Just a couple of final thoughts. I hope that you've learned from listening to Spencer today that life isn't always linear. The direction that we're heading in is not always the direction that we end up in. And life is very rarely predictable. Sometimes we find ourselves in places we never expected, places that break us or remake us. I found myself squarely in the middle of both of those scenarios at the same time, broken and remade. So if you're listening right now and you're in the middle of your own unraveling, if you've lost your script or don't recognize your life anymore, if maybe you or somebody else just yelled cut and asked you to start over at the beginning, like what happened to me at age 44, I just want to say this. And I think that Spencer will agree. Don't ever be afraid of your life takes you. It might be different, and it might also be more beautiful than anything that you ever imagined. So thanks for being here. Thanks again to Spencer for sharing so vulnerably, and thank you for listening. I will be hanging out in the comments on this episode. I will provide all of the links for where to find Spencer and some of his great stuff in the description. And that's it. See you next time.